Here's the thing. I think it's clear, and a lot of people were saying it in the comments earlier, that we're dealing with propaganda. My thing is, I just want people to have a lens, to have a way of interpreting this propaganda and making sense of it.
Yes.
Especially in this current era, because there's a kind of zeitgeist, the spirit of the moment that kind of takes place, and we need to be able to explain and understand it for what it is. So if you take the Halloween movies, the reboots that they're doing now, really what that is the ascendancy of white feminism over white men, right? If you look at that film, because remember, if you go to the original one from the 70s, Jamie Lee Curtis's character represented this youthful kind of feminism in the 70s. Well, in this one, it's her character, her daughter, and her granddaughter, and they're all fighting Michael Myers. I mean, and if you watch the film, you see these little feminist moments and statements, that kind of take place, and the girl leaving her boyfriend because he disrespects her. All of these are narratives that are being played out. And so what you're seeing is the attempt to reascend 3 generations of white feminism against the brutality of white men. This is the symbolism behind Halloween. Candyman, in the original, again, we're dealing with a black character written by a white man in a horror genre. Candyman had to do with this potential relationship between black men and white women, and the titillating, dangerous nature of it. This is a trope they've been playing with since slavery. The reboot, it's both a reboot and a sequel, really. This current one that's out juxtaposes white women in the narrative with black women. And so now you have black feminists that are coming in this post BLM moment. They're bringing in this protest movement culture in a way. They're bringing in intersectionality, all of which is positioning heterosexual black men against the rest of the community, right? As if heterosexual black men, like Michael Myers in Halloween, are the problem. And even when they are innocently killed, because Michael Myers is not innocent. Even as a child, he kills his family. You know what I mean? He's not innocent. Candyman and all the men that comprise Candyman are all innocent black men. And yet, despite that, they are still a problem for, the LGBT community, the feminist community, in the black community. That black men are still a problem, which is why what TC said earlier was so key. Anthony was a problem before he was Candyman.
Mm-hmm.
He was a problem before he was Candyman, and he was a problem after, just like all the others. But when you look at it, they were effectively Emmett Till.
Yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
since when does Emmett Till get positioned as a monster that terrorizes his own community?
You know what I find what the problem is, Doc?
Hmm.
You know what I find what our problem is? The problem is that we exist.
Exactly.
The problem is that you exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it trickles down to the point where I remember BGS said, the biggest problem is that we were never ever supposed to not get up out of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest problem is now that the white folks can't just come and exterminate us right off the back. So they have to come up with machinations and other ideas to do it. So they'll use our women, they'll use anything to try to do, they use the media. But when it comes to the point with our women, they're even, like I said, they're taking on the mindset of the white man, but they're realizing we're just mad because you exist. Your image still exists.
Right.
The problem is that the one thing you got to understand, masculinity and femininity are 2 things that's supposed to exist in the world. Masculinity is supposed to be over femininity because it is supposed to lead. That's how the way the creator intended. But the problem is, even feminists and even people of other genders realize that. The problem is that if it's existing in its natural state, it's still a problem. That's why.
Well, but also understand how it gets upended. When we talk about second wave feminism in the mid 20th century, second wave feminism comes in with this new narrative, right? That white men are their biggest problem. Mm-hmm. And really, they're using abuse, they're using rape, they're using murder as the narratives. But really, what it really comes down to is a competition between white women and white men for power. And white
Exactly.
women are saying, and they've been really saying this since the 19th century, but it really comes to a head in the 60s and 70s. They want power, and white men are in the way. White men are not allowing them to operate on the same level. So this is a family fight that they're going through. The issue with masculinity and femininity that we're grappling with is that moment where white women establish a route to power, a route to middle and upper middle class life through positioning men as the primary antagonist against women. And so when you have black feminists that are appropriating that narrative, they're appropriating that blueprint. They are learning from white women. If I take this position that my man and I are against each other and he is my biggest problem, I can now align myself and take advantage of the opportunities that white feminism is producing. So really what we've seen in the last 6 decades is the internalizing of these feminist principles as a route to advancement. And that's what we see even now. The latest generation that we see taking the reins over this film and starting to produce films themselves, like Nia DaCosta, if that's how you pronounce her name, is to take that paradigm of white tension between men and women and really female victimization and apply it within the black community, especially post 2015, where you have this BLM narrative that is rooted in black women being able to appropriate black male deaths for their own political advancement. By mixing all that together, what they're able to do is take that blueprint that they appropriate from white feminists and take it to another degree. And this is what we see in the film. Now you have, the LGBT community and the feminist community aligning themselves, because understand, LGBT, that narrative was doing the same thing that we saw with the feminist narrative. Because now you could have, because you had white gays and lesbians who are saying, look at all of these oppressive heterosexual men that are hurting us. Well, in order for black LGBTs to advance, they did the same thing the feminists did. They said, look at all of these sexist heterosexual men. But the problem is heterosexual black men have no freaking power.
Thank you.
They have no power. They're not enacting policy. They don't have the power to. Hell, even in churches, you may have heterosexual black male pastors, but the congregations and the administrations of those churches are all run by women. So what I'm saying is the feminist and LGBT narrative of appropriating the white approach to it is something that is internalized in black communities, and black men are positioned to be white men, even though we haven't demonstrated any desire that any, reputable form, shout out to the man Not, where Curry actually goes into this and proves that black men do not aspire to be white men. But beyond that, even if we did, we don't have the power to do it anyway. And so that's what you see in the film. You see black men being made the problem and made the monster, even though we don't have the requisite capacities that white men do that made them monsters in the eyes of feminists and gays and lesbians in the white community. That's what we're dealing with. And this film takes all of those narratives and throws them at the screen. And at the end of the day, you walk away with problematic, straight black men.
Yep. Yes.